Irashaimase. Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this week we have Divine Orders. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. From developer Angle M, Divine Orders released for the PC via Steam in May of 2025. This title is a multi-scrolling Danmaku, or bullet hell, that has heavy RPG elements. As far as myself, I've really enjoyed my time with the game, though I feel like I've just barely started to scratch the surface of it. It has a really nice, grindy progression system that's very RPG inspired. However, if that's not necessarily for you, then it's not going to be a title you're going to enjoy. It's also a little on the visually rough side, and depending on the kind of shoot 'em up you like, this one is a wide scroll, mostly vertical scroller, so that might not necessarily be what you'd be interested in. This might be one to avoid. But one thing to keep in mind, it has a very low price point, so the barrier for entry is quite low. If you like what you see here, I highly encourage you to check out the game. With that said, we find ourselves at the main menu. So there are some issues with the game itself, mostly relating to translation and some text issues, so do keep that in mind. You can see that here with the Lord game rather than Load game. Another thing to keep in mind, this review is being recorded on a Steam Deck, which this game performs beautifully on. So even though it's listed as unknown at this point, it does perform quite well on a Steam Deck. So with that said, when you go to start a game, we're taken to this menu here. This is where you would choose your difficulty, so you've got Maturity and Dawn. We'll just keep things on Dawn to keep it simple. And then here, after you've done that, you select a save file. There are 5 slots available. You can delete a previous save if that's what you want, but we're just going to throw on a new one so you can see the way the game starts. Then another really important thing to note, the game does have story and cutscenes spread throughout. However, it is possible to disable those at this screen. So you can have all the cutscenes or the story basically turned on, you can disable it, or you can skip any that you've previously seen. One thing that I do appreciate is you can go and change the settings once you've started the game in the options menu. So now that we've started the game, this is our hub town, and this is where we'll be spending a lot of the time between our actual shoot 'em up missions. We'll be getting to this in just a moment, but first off, let's dive into the map and the actual gameplay of the game itself. So this is our primary map that we're going to be using to play the game in. So we have all these stages that are part of areas, and then ultimately once you clear a stage to a high enough level, then you'll unlock the boss for that particular area. We'll start with 1-1 and selecting the stage. This is the gameplay of Divine Order. So it's primarily a vertical scroller, at least with the way that our character is oriented, and we have 2 primary types of attack. We have our primary shot, and then we also have a heavy shot. The heavy shot is very much bullet hell style, where we have focus movement when we're using that shot. The game itself has some really interesting systems since it is RPG based. As we defeat enemies, we're both earning experience and gold. And there's a couple things that determine the rate of that. So in the top left, you see that we've got an experience counter there. In addition to that, we also have what looks like gems. So as you defeat enemies, we'll get gems, and those gems are the gold that we'll ultimately be using for our progression. The more gold you get, the higher the gold rank becomes, and that also affects your experience. So the more gold you get, the more experience you get. So the very first section, 1-1, goes by pretty quick. Once we get to the end of it, we have our results screen with experience gold, as well as damage taken and your vitality cost, and which types of gems we picked up. So the vitality cost is how much it costs to explore that stage itself. And then we also get a grade based off of how well we did, and that is provides a multiplier for our experience and our gold. So the better you do, the higher the experience, the gold. We also collected a couple items in the stage itself. So now we find ourselves back at this screen. Let's talk a little bit about some of the other elements we have here. So in the top left, you have your HP as well as Vitality. Vitality is basically the cost for visiting a stage itself. So if you're out of Vitality, you'll ultimately not be able to complete a stage and you'll have to return to the town to restore that. We also have some warning messages that show up down below. Then you can see our experience and gold that's been earned from the various areas that we're in. So now that we've seen that a little bit, let's dive into a second stage just so we can talk about some of the other elements. So there are also skills that we can ultimately obtain. I don't have any of those equipped yet, but when we get to town I'll show you a little bit more about those. So here you can see that the screen is not always scrolling in a vertical orientation. We're actually scrolling diagonally. Sometimes things will move back, sometimes things will move down, sometimes you'll have a fixed screen. It just depends on the stage itself. The bullet hell patterns at the beginning of the game start out pretty simple, but they do ramp up quite quickly. We have an HP system, however, and especially as you progress through the game, you can do things to mitigate the amount of damage that you take. So now let's talk about one of the other elements we have. So under our experience and the gem, the gold meter that we have there, we also have what is our absorption meter. So what that is as we are defeating enemies, we're building up for our absorption meter, and there's also some plants that you can destroy that will more quickly fill that, like this one right here. What the absorption meter does is it allows us to activate a special mode where as we shoot enemies, they'll we'll get crystals farmed from the boss itself for a lot of gold and experience, but we also, when we defeat the enemies in that mode, the enemies' bullets will cancel into additional gold. So it's a way that we can build up gold and experience quite rapidly. Throughout the course of your gameplay, you can also do more to increase those multipliers you can potentially get if that's the style you want to play. But one thing to note, once that absorption mode, as it's still referred to, runs out, then your gold rank that you've built up is reset back to its level 1 basically. So now once again we see our results screen here, including the materials that we collected from the stage, and we can return back to our map. So now we're starting to get a little bit low on vitality, so let's pop back to the town itself and you can see what we can do here. So in the town we can leave for doing our quest, but we also have the guild, and here you'll turn in materials that you're collecting from the stage for additional gold, as well as the ranking up in the guild itself, and that will allow you to go and earn both more currency and take on fights for certain enemies, or rather bounties for certain enemies in the game, and those enemies will have targets specifically highlighted above their HP bar. Then we have the shop, and this is the most important part of the game. So here, like with these various shops, we're going to go and turn the experience, gold, and materials that we've collected into items to power up our character, either levels for our character, which we can do in the inn. Here you'll rest and you'll use the gold as well as your experience to level up based off of how much you have. Or if you don't want to use the experience and the gold, you can just use the backyard to recover your HP and part of your vitality. However, you're looking to restore all your HP and all your vitality, you do want to spend the gold to do so. In addition, we have the weapon shop, and here we can purchase better weapons for our character. In addition to that, there are also sub-weapons, so you have a significantly more powerful character. And if you leave your icon over the weapon you're looking at, then it will show you the different rarities. So what that means, you go and buy it at common, and then you can spend either experience to level it up or gold to increase its rarity, and you can see some of the effects there in that image, which is certainly awesome. Then last we have the rune shop, and in the rune shop we're primarily purchasing passives that you can increase the strength of your character, or items to get those said passives, or lastly also skills, which we do have equipped, or which we have to equip rather after we purchase them. So the way you equip things is in your inventory. So here you can equip both a main weapon and a sub weapon. We don't have any sub weapons available yet, but that's where you would do so. And then under the runes we can see the passives. You do start with 2 passives right off the bat, one to increase your movement speed or decrease it depending on your play style. I do like to be a little bit faster in this type of wide scroll, so that's the direction we'll take. There are 2 screens of passives. In addition to that, we also have our skills. So these ones require skill points to use, which you earn throughout the course of your gameplay, and we can choose which of the 2 buttons available for a Steam Deck controller. It's the X or the Y. So we'll assign this one that we do have right now, the Aura Blaze, to X. And that's what you mainly have available for you in the town. So now that we've seen that, let's dive to a more advanced save so you can kind of see a little bit about how the game progresses. So now we've loaded up the save that I've primarily spent the most time with. I've actually spent several hours in this one, and as you can see here, I've made it up to level 30, and you can see my stats listed there on the left. In addition to that, when we go into the shop, so you can see under the weapon shop that there's some more weapons that we have available for us to purchase, as well as like some sub-weapons I've spent. One thing I didn't mention, so when you're purchasing weapons and also the runes, there's a gold cost associated with them as well as a material cost. So you need all the materials listed there to be able to purchase that weapon. So that's where a lot of the grind comes into play, is playing through stages to get the particular materials that you need to build that weapon. And in addition to that, you can see here that we've got more powerful weapons. You can equip multiple sub-weapons at once, but just one main weapon. So, exiting back out to the quest menu, you can see that things are definitely a little bit more opened up. So as you complete the stages themselves, we'll be filling up an analyze meter. So that's over here on the right side of the screen. You can see the analyze there, and then below that you also have the vitality cost. As you complete more stages, the vitality cost does go up, so that's something to keep in mind, but you have more vitality to begin with. So once you complete all this, once you've fully analyzed all the sections of an area, it unlocks the boss. Unfortunately, it's not possible to refight the boss, but they are pretty satisfying. So here we can kind of see the second boss fight. So they're multi-staged bullet hell bosses that are pretty well designed. We have that health bar at the top, and each of the parts of the boss are divided up into different phases. You can see the health bar that we're working on is in the green part, and then once that exits, then we move on to the next phase. There is a brief bullet cancel when that moves from one phase to the next, and overall I feel like the boss design is pretty solid, but you aren't going to encounter them as frequently as other enemies because once you've cleared them, they're done. Now with that said, we find ourselves back at the main screen here. So now, with all that, with everything that we've seen so far, let's dive into a more advanced stage. Here's 3-1, one of the more recent stages I've gotten to. Area 3-1, Devoured Lands. Basically, what we have there is Divine Order served up for your enjoyment. So before we finish talking about the plus and minus flavors, this is a bit more of an advanced character now, where we're using multiple sub-weapons, as well as having our at least one skill equipped. And when you defeat bosses, you also have the ability to choose some perks that are largely relating to the absorption system in the game itself. So as you can see, we have the absorption ready. So at this point, I took the one that allows me to have a more powerful absorption with higher multipliers. It works really well. As far as some of the materials you collect, so as you defeat enemies, you can get materials, but there's also ore like this one I'm standing on, and you'll for those, if it's a tree, you have to shoot the tree to get the ore, or if it's something like well, you shoot the tree for the wood. If it's ore, you stand on top of the ore and you'll ultimately mine it. There's also enemies that we'll be fighting from the guild, and those ones have targets ahead of them. You won't always have bounties for them, but if you do, like these ones here, defeating these will ultimately allow us to get more gold and guild rank when we return back to town. So now let's talk a little bit about the minus flavors for the game itself. So really the biggest thing that I feel is a minus flavor is this is just not going to be the type of game for every type of shoot 'em up fan. So you have that heavy RPG element, you have the story, and overall, as I mentioned, the game is a little bit on the rough from a graphics standpoint. So if you don't like something that's a grindy experience, this definitely isn't going to be the kind of title for you. But all that said, like for me personally, on the plus flavors I do quite like this gutsy gameplay. The progression is really satisfying as you play through the stages, earning the experience and the gold, having that gold rank, the absorption system, all the various elements tied together has been a lot of fun to play through, and it's one that I want to progress even further through to see how strong I can make myself and how the game itself ends. Then, as we see here, we're still going and progressing through the stages, getting additional analysis taken care of. So the grindy element, you're going to have to be repeating the stages, aiming for materials as well as the experience and the gold. But using all of that to make your character stronger really is what I've enjoyed about this title. So at the end of the day, this is a solid recommend from the chef if you like a shoot 'em up that has a heavier RPG element to it. And with that, we find ourselves at the end of this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, we want to thank you so much for joining us. We hope you have a wonderful week yourself, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.